Okay, so we are, I think, 2 minutes or 3 minutes on top of the hour. Since it's only going to be a small group, what I'm going to do is take you through what I think we need to do from a change management perspective, and then maybe have a discussion around it. So just wanted to make sure that you are able to see what I'm sharing. So are you able to see what I'm sharing on my camera? If someone can unmute yourself and
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Cool. Thanks, Abhinav. So in any change management process, project, I think this is where it starts. So we have someone who identifies the need for change and initiates the change project or change management project or a transformation project. So once the initiation of the project is done, there is a project team that is created, and then you kind of mobilize the entire larger change management office or a program management office or whatever structure that each organization follows. And then once you've done that, once you've come together, identified what needs to change, how we will drive the change, who will drive the change, and the process is clear, then we kind of scale the change. So you do a POC and then you kind of scale it across depending upon the success of the POC. And once you've done that, then you need to embed the change into your organization, right? So if you don't embed, what happens with a lot of change management project is they do all of this well, but fail to do this particular step, which is to embed the new process, new way of working into the regular day-to-day activities. So this is where day-to-day activities is a status quo. By the time you come here, whatever you wanted to change should become the status quo. So that is where overall at a large point, I think change management currently looks at. So we'll look at each phase and I'll stop and we can have a discussion at the end of each phase. The first phase that we're going to talk about is the initiate phase, right? In the initiate phase, there are 3 things that we need to understand. So what is the change that we are trying to make? Who are the people who are going to make those changes, which is change agents? And what is the environment in which we are going to make this change? So this is one of the phases where people quickly, kind of move really fast in this phase without spending enough time. And my experience in terms of learning from people who manage change really well is that they spend a lot of time upfront in this phase so that they can avoid spending a lot of time at the fag end of the project trying to struggle and manage all the changes, right? So first things first, which is what is the change that you're trying to make? So there are 6 levels of changes that you can make, right? So you can change a policy, you can change a process, you can change a management system, you can change how people think or behave, you can change what people believe, and you can change the entire organizational culture. At some point in time, you will find that you will have to struggle with various levels of change in a single change management project. There might be times where you are not only changing the policy, you're also changing the process, you're also changing the structures, and at the same time, you want to change culture. So the challenge there is that if you're trying to change culture, you need to change all of this. If you're trying to change the belief systems, you'll have to change everything else below that. If you're trying to change the way people think and act, you need to change everything else below that. So that is the way it works. It's kind of a ladder. You need to go one step at a time. You cannot just skip and go to the top without having to go through all these processes. So you need to understand where you are going and what is the kind of change that you are making, because this will determine what you will do in terms of mobilization, what you will do in terms of scale, what will you do in terms of structures, what you will do in terms of embedding the change that you're trying to make. It will also determine how much time, money, energy, effort that will go into the change project itself, right? And so once you've kind of figured that out, then the next thing that comes is, what exactly are you changing it from, and what exactly are you changing it to? So people call it a lot of different things. People call it vision, having a very clear vision of where we are trying to go. People may call it having the end result as is to be framework. But as long as we are able to have a very clear vision in terms of where we are trying to go and what is it that we are changing from and what is it that we are changing it to, it is very important. Now, this step happens at multiple phases. The first step happens at the initiate phase, where you actually have a very basic idea in terms of what needs to change. You may have some idea about what it needs to change to as well. So you can actually have that in place, but you will need to understand that, just having that as a solidified or a decided entity at the start of the project in the initiate phase itself is not really a great idea, because then it becomes a change that you're thrusting on people, where people do not have any agency, where people do not have any say in terms of what needs to change and what it needs to change to. That is also one of the biggest reasons why change management projects fail, because they fail to consider and understand that it is people who need to change, and people need agency, people need a say in the process. If you just simply say that change to from X to Y, you will find there is a lot of resistance in that change. I recently conducted a LinkedIn poll around change management and what are the reasons that people think change management project or transformation project typically fail. And there are 4 options that I'd given. One was around lack of vision. There was one which was around lack of leadership buy-in. There was around organizational culture not being ready to change, and a lot of resistance to change. And one of the things that came out at the top was the organizational culture. The second most important reason why people thought it fails is resistance to change. And this resistance to change comes from the fact that we do not involve the people who will need to change. So that's why if you see, we spoke about the 3 things that we need to consider, right? So what needs to change, which is what we spoke here, what needs to change, who will be the people who will need to change and who will drive that change, and the environment in which this change needs to happen. So now let's move to the next one. So when we talk about the people or the change agents, typically people will fall in this spectrum, in one phase of this spectrum. People could either be conspirators, which is openly against you and sabotaging the project. May not be open, maybe at a very subconscious level or at a very political level, they are trying to find ways and means to sabotage your project, because they see that the change management will actually lead them to a loss of power or a loss of control or whatever it is that they value the most. And then the second level is people who are combative. So they are open. They will challenge you. They will question you on what needs to change, why they need to change, why do they need to change from this to this, why not something else. So these are combative people, right? But the point is that they are open. And the third one is compliant. So this is where the majority of people will fall in, which is if you don't give them an option and you say that there is no other option but you have to change, they will change. But as long as they have an option not to change, they will not change. And they are the people who need social proof. When I say social proof, what I mean is they are the people who need to see everyone else around them already changing. So unless they see others around them changing, they will not change. They will not become compliant. So that is where they stand. And the next one is cooperative, so which means that they are more than happy, not more than happy, but they are open to work with you. They are open to explore what this change means. These are the people who think that this change could potentially offer something good for them. And they also feel that it is time for this change to happen. They do not want to lead the change. They do not want to be the people who are openly advocating the change, but they are people who will work with you, who are open to change. Then there are collaborative people. So these are people who think that it is important to change, and they are open about it. So they will openly support the change project. They will openly come out and say that this change is good. We need to change. It is imperative that we need to change, and it is important that we need to change, and all of that. And the final thing, final stage of people is co-creative people. These are people who will not only are willing to work with you to and openly support you to change, but these are also the people who will put in the support. They will, let's say, for example, they will volunteer. They will get their teams to work with you. They will get budgets for you. They will find resources for you. They will lobby for you. And the reason why they are trying to do this could be twofold. One is it could be because they think that the new change or the new to be state will actually give them power or whatever it is that they desire. And the other end of the spectrum could be people who genuinely think that it is a change which is long overdue and that this really needs to change. And they are fully behind the change. Now, so once it is important that we identify who falls under which, because in any change management project, you will have someone at each one of these levels. If you can identify who that someone is, there is a whole lot of things that you can do with them in terms of communication, in terms of influence, in terms of expectation management, in terms of moving them from one level to the next, to get them to engage in the change project so that they do not fall in these two levels. It is okay if there are people who are compliant. It is okay even if there are people who are combative, because they are still engaged. So if you look at it, the engagement kind of goes, it is lowest here and here. And every step that you take either below or above, the engagement kind of increases, which means that people at this level are highly engaged with change project. At the same time, people at this level are also very highly engaged with this change project. So you need people to move from here because they are highly engaged, but in a negative way, and to move them to one step up. You will find that these are the guys who are easy to convert or the early adopters, and these are the guys who kind of are fast followers, who would like to kind of work with you and drive the project as they see that there is a lot of value for them. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. And even in the larger population, so how do you talk about stakeholder management, right? So you need to identify who your stakeholders are. And you will find that this is a very interesting model for you to understand who your stakeholders are and how do you engage or communicate with them. So at the top, you'll find people, this is a population of people who will get affected or impacted by the change, which means if we are trying to, let's say, for example, implement a new product or solution, everyone who gets impacted by the new product or solution is in this population, which means that every functional guy who will need to change from current usage to the new usage, who will need to get trained and all of that. So that's the impacted people. Then you'll find that there are influential leaders in your organization, people who have the resources and the say which can decide whether or not a particular project will go forward or whether or not the project will kind of see the dust, right? So those are the influential leaders. And then of course there are the influential connectors. So these are people who people in your organizations go to. These may not necessarily be the managers, these may not necessarily be the leaders, but these are the people who get work done. In every organization, these are people who are highly connected, who work across silos, who people turn to both from a professional advice perspective as well as a personal advice perspective. These are the people who turn to when they have a problem and they want someone to talk to about the problem and who can actually help them identify, if not the solution, at least the way forward in terms of who could help solve the problem. These are connectors, influential connectors. Now, you will find at the intersection of each, there is a smaller population, right? So people at the intersection of people who are impacted and who are leaders, you need to be able to, provide regular updates as to what is happening, where the project is, where do you think the project, where do you need support, all the status updates you need to ensure that the status update goes to all of them for sure. It needs to go to everyone, but these set of people are very, very critical because they have the say. They're both impacted and at the same time can start or stop your project from going forward. Then comes the the impacted and the influential connectors. So these are people who are not only impacted but are influential in terms of having reach in the organization. So these are people from whom you should seek feedback, whether what you're doing is working or not working, what could change, what needs to kind of move or shift in terms of the way the project is being run and all of that. So any kind of feedback that you need from needs to come from this set of people. And this is the sort of people who are your change agents, who are influential connectors and at the same time are influential leaders, right? So these are the guys who can, if you can get onboarded really quickly as your change agents, as the people who will talk and advocate about your change initiative, they are the ones who will drive the success of the change initiative. It is super critical that we identify these people. And of course, the intersection of all of these three, of people who are impacted and our leaders and our connectors, they should be your steering committee. So typically what happens is a steering committee is identified and put together based on leaders in your organization and no one else. Usually, in some organizations, they do invite people who get impacted, but there is not, and again, there is not too much thinking goes into what and who these people on the steering committee needs to be. Once we've identified that, we need to understand their motivations. And typically you'll find anybody and everybody is motivated by one of these four usually, right? Which is more money, more time, which if you can free up their time or make their time more productive, more recognition, and more status. So typically you'll find that people are motivated by one of these four. Now the question is, what motivates these people? So if you think, if you have the stakeholders mapped, and if you know what motivates each one of these stakeholders, then it becomes much more easier to kind of influence their view, to kind of have very targeted communication with each one of them when it comes to winning them over for your project when the time comes. You don't need to do it at all if things go well, but if things go south, you need to know what motivates them so that you are able to kind of bring them over or win them over for your project. You also need to be very clear as change agents or drivers of change or leaders of change, what motivates you, because that is a very important thing that is super critical for you to know, so that if someone is trying to influence you in one way or the other, you know which lever people are or could potentially pull. So that's the change agents part. So if you remember, there were three circles, right? So one was the change itself. What is it that you are trying to drive? Second was the change agents, as to know who will drive the change and who will get impacted. Third one was the environment that you want to build this change. So a lot of change management frameworks exist in the world. They tend to be a simple, maybe a 5-step process or an 8-step process, which Jim Collins talks about, or John Cotter talks about, or a four-quadrant metrics that McKinsey or Bain talk about. All of them give one single solution or a framework for any and all organization, which is also another reasons why it fails. So you need to understand what kind of an organization that you are working in. Is it highly political, or is it highly scientific in terms of data driven? Is it function specific or function focused, which is, for example, Apple is design led, right? So for example, IBM right now is services led, SAP is product led. So is it functional or is it collaborative? Is it internal focus, which is, for example, Apple is internal focus. While they give importance to customers, they think that they will drive what the customers need to hear and see and use. Or is it external focus, which is completely customer focused and customer driven, or partner focused or partner driven? Is it entrepreneurial or is it hierarchical? So do people need permission, formal organizational permission to do anything? Or can people take initiative and drive things within your organization as we go along? So depending upon where your organization fits in, the kind of activities that you do, the kind of energy and effort that will go into, the kind of resources that you will need, and the kind of tactics that you will use in order to drive your change management project will differ, right? So, and another way to look at the same organizational perspective is, where does your organization fit in this entire model? So in terms of motivation to change and in terms of ability to change. Ability to change can be gleaned from the past change initiatives, where they're successful, where they're not successful, how evolved is your change management process in your organization and all of that. Motivation to change could be, is it okay? Is the organization comfortable doing what the organization is doing? Or is the organization in an industry which requires the organization to kind of drive this entire thing? And at the same time, motivation to change could also be whether you are on a burning platform, or whether you want to disrupt yourself, or are you being disrupted, right? So depending upon where you are in the organization, again, the tactics in terms of that you will employ in terms of managing the exact change process, the communication that you do will all change. So I will stop here. So that's the first part of the 4-step process that we spoke about, which is initiate, mobilize, scale, and embed. So I will stop here and ask if anyone would like to share based on what you just heard. Does it resonate with you? Do you see this happening in your organization? Do you not see this happening in your organization? What comes up for you when you listen to all of this, when it comes to initiate?
Hi, Mukesh. So that is the insights of change management, different type of scenario you have given that all are good. Somewhere change management with some proactive support from user or some other side party also. It will be, even accepting the change, they can give some more value addition also in that particular product or solution, what type of thing. So it will better for overall. But again, as in a practical manner, if I say in my past experience also, if we because we are in technical, so we generally say technical language, that type of product solution or whatever you say, SAP new rollout or whatever, even from moving from EHP to S/4HANA type of thing. So we can give the better environment, better solution to our end user or business mid-size, middle management also. But from our side only, we can share something and they are somewhere ready to do some change management. But only I think if I round a circle type of thing, so in that that will not cover 100% in change management. That is requiring somewhere pressure management also from higher management. So somewhere if I say 80% I have put some solution and they are ready to change, but again their willing is not to adopt the change. If I put 20% of that pressure technology, push technology from outside, then after we can say our success rate will be more than only purely change management. In this, I think we have to cover something in that area also, some pressure or some language type of thing. You can think better on that way, I think.
True. Very true. I'll come to that. You make a very important point, which is that not everyone will change just because you're trying to drive a change. You need top management buy-in and push, and as well. So valid points, Raji. Anyone else wants to share anything so far from what you've listened? So if you think that what I'm saying doesn't make sense, you have to tell me that it doesn't make sense so that we can have a conversation. The idea here is I'm not trying to say that whatever I say is correct. All I'm trying to say is that this is based on my learning, both having driven a lot of change within SAP and before SAP as well, and also by what I see around me happening, and also what I read from theory and research. So anyone else? If not, we can move to the next phase in the change management project, and what are some of the things that we need to think through. So you will find that I'm not going to be any prescriptive in terms of what are the tactics that you should be using. You will find that I will be posing questions that you need to think about when you are trying to drive the change management process. And the tactics are well known and are probably the same across the board, irrespective of what framework that you use. But what is more important is the thinking that needs to go behind the change management process itself. So we now come to the second phase. So I'm assuming that there are no further comments to add. So Arulaji, this is exactly what you said, right? When you're trying to mobilize, it is important that you need to have pressure coming in from both sides.
Yes, yes.
You need to have top-down leadership as well, which is the leaders saying that this is needed and this changes what they want the organization to go through. But
So
that is not enough.
Already ready, but I have actually accelerated before that part. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So, and what is important and what we miss is that it is not just enough to do top-down leadership drive. It is also important to have a grassroots uprising as well. You will find that there are typically what happens in a change management process or a change management project. Let's say, for example,
one more part I want to add here, as mentioned in just chat, to show to or share some benefit type of thing also to that my target audience or somewhere user or whatever you can say, so that they can say, now if we adopt this type of changes, naturally our life will be more easier than better type of thing. So some
Correct.
Just motivational type of thing. Yeah, I think you are also ready for that part.
Absolutely ready. So that's the next page that I have to share. But before we go there, I think there is important thing that you'll realize that a lot of change management projects fail because typically what happens at some point in time, the leadership of the organization decides that okay, what we are doing needs to change. So they put together a change management team. They put together a 6-month plan or a 3-month plan, a project plan, saying that okay, this is the first step, second step, third step, fourth step. The team is identified, is identified, the to state or to be state is identified, and then there is a communication sent out saying that okay, this project has been launched, and now going forward, this is the project lead, and the project lead then starts communicating in terms of what needs to change, blah blah blah. All of that starts to happen from here. People forget to go from down from here. You will find that the biggest resistance to change or the biggest resistors to change are usually the middle managers, because they are the ones who will lose the most when it comes to either power, money, status, and are fearful of change efforts. You can think about your last change management or a change project, and you will find people who are in the middle are the ones who are kind of always resisting the change. The end guys probably already know that things need to change because they are the ones who are actually working on the front lines. They are the ones who feel the brunt of either the customer feedback or the tool not working really well, or the tool being very difficult to use or whatever. So they are easier to change. The leaders also understand the need to change because they know it could potentially be either the matter of survival or it could be what will drive the organization to the next level. So both ends understand. Now the challenge comes is the middle level because they probably are away from the front lines and they also don't understand the bigger picture. So in order for you to get them to change, you need to apply pressure both from the top and from the bottom. I recently shared a blog post where I shared a video which was posted by Simon Sinek, and again he talks about the same thing. So he talks about this large corporate, 100,000 people wanting to drive a millennial change program where they wanted to train millennials and train them to kind of become the next generation leaders. They came to him with a typical project plan where they said that, okay, we want you to do, 50 workshops across the country, and train all the millennials that we have and their managers and all of that. And he said, no, it will not work. It is a typical project plan which will fail. While you engage everyone, but at the same time, he said it will fail. So they asked him, okay, what is it that you think we should be doing? He said, I will train 100 people. I'll run one workshop, and I will do. I will choose who these 100 people are going to be, who are going to be in the workshop, and the criteria is they need to be less than, or they need to be born after 1985, which eliminates all senior management from the workshop. They need to fill out a form which says, this is why should they be considered to be part of this workshop, and submit the form. And he will then pick the 50 or 100, whoever people that he wants to train. And they did the process. They got about 120, 140 odd people who registered. He read through every single one of those nominations and picked the 100 people that he ran the workshop with. At the end of the workshop, he asked them that, he said that, there is no change. There is no millennial training program that is existing right now in the company. We want to create one. Who is willing to volunteer to build this program with me? And he got about 40 or 50 people who said, okay, they are willing to volunteer to kind of build this program from scratch with Simon Sinek. And when they go back to their organizations, across the country, they spoke about how great the program was, how great the workshop was. And the next day, the CEO calls Simon Sinek and says that, what have you guys done? I'm getting phone calls from every single senior manager or managers of these millennials saying that, why were we not invited to this workshop? We want these workshops to be done in our regions as well, and with our millennials as well. Now, what happens is, instead of someone top down pushing things from top down, which is what they're trying to do, there is also demand coming from bottom up. You always know, right? When there is demand coming from people, it is much easier to change the process, policy, system, or whatever. So you need to be able to create that demand by engaging the people at the grassroots level. So that is a very, very important step, which people typically I've seen fail. Another important thing that people tend to do is to look at buy-in, right? So buy-in from people, from stakeholders. I strongly feel that we need to move from thinking about buy-in to invest in. What is the difference? Difference is buy-in comes after the fact. Once you've decided what needs to happen, once you've decided that okay, this is what needs to change, and this is what it needs to change to, you want people to buy into it, right? So, for example, it's a product, or you go to a shop and you buy a finished product, right? Whereas, as an investor, if I take the VC or VC phenomenon or whatever, as an investor, you invest time, money, energy, resources to build the product, right? So that's the same change that comes here. So if you're trying to build buy-in, you are doing it late, already too late. You need to look at investors who can invest in. In the case of Simon Sinek and his example that he shared, he created investors who wanted to invest into the program. He created investors who were already bought in, who said, okay, I'm willing to get my people to spend their 1 day, 2 day, 3 day workshop in workshops, and they wanted it, right? So imagine what would have happened if the senior management of that company said, okay, we're running this countrywide workshop. Everyone who's under 25 years old mandated to attend these workshops. What would you think the reaction would be from their managers? They would say, why should they attend this? If they are attending this, who's going to do their job for the 3 days? What about the productivity loss? There is a whole lot of resistance, and that is where you need buy-in, right? So that is the fundamental difference between a buying and an investing in. And the more you are able to move towards investing, the easier the change management process becomes, the lesser the resistance is. That's an important thing that we need to understand. So we spoke about resistance to change, right? So how do you overcome that resistance to change? So this is a very simple formula, which we need to remember as change agents if we really want to overcome the resistance to change. DVF is always greater than R. So R is the resistance to change. What is D? D is dissatisfaction of current situation, right? With the current situation. As long as people are not happy with where they are, they're open to change. If they're happy doing what they're doing, if they're happy using the tool that they're using, if they're happy with the process, if they're happy with the policy, extremely difficult to get them to change, right? So if you really want them to change, you need to create that element of unhappiness. Now, how you do it is up to each one of you. You can be creative in terms of how you want to do it. One of the easiest way to do is create a comparison. Okay, so and that is also the reason why the from to frame or as is to be framework is important. So human mind works in comparison or thinks in comparison. So there was this very famous experiment where you were compared to someone who's earning a lot less than you do, and you feel good. And the moment you are compared to someone who's earning a lot more than you do, you're not satisfied with what you're earning. You were just satisfied when you were happy with what you're earning one day back or 15 minutes back when you were being compared with someone who was a lot worse than you. The moment you're compared with something better, you you're dissatisfied with your current situation. So that is one way to kind of create dissatisfaction. The second one is create a vision of a better future, right? So when you create that comparison, if you can actually show that this is where the utopia is, or this is where you will feel really great. And if you actually think about those 4 things that motivate people, right? So money, time, status, and recognition. This is where you'll have more money, you'll have more time to spend with your family, or less, more productive, or more recognition and more status. People will want to change. And of course, the last one is all about clearly defined next step, right? So if you do not have a very clearly defined next step, what they can do immediately after this meeting, immediately after this email, immediately after listening to you, so that they can move to the better future and avoid the current situation, you will have reducing resistance to change. So this is how you kind of drive energy and momentum into this entire change project. Another way to think about it is, how do you bring energy into your change management process or project, right? So another way to think about this is this. So meaning, hope, and power, right? So when you add all of these, you get energy for your process, for your project. So as long as every individual who's get impacted knows what this change management, what this change means to them, hopes that the change will lead them to a better future, and has power to influence the change, you will have energy for your change management process. You will find people who are more than willing to work with you, and you will find there is less and less resistance and more energy in order for you to drive whatever it is, whatever the change that you're trying to push. Finally, in terms of mobilize, one of the things that we need to understand is this bell curve. This bell curve is nothing but the law of diffusion of innovation. It was coined by Geoffrey Moore, and he says that in any innovation, there are 5 stages of adoption, right? So the first one are the early adopters. These will adopt anything that comes up in terms of innovation. Then comes the fast followers, right? These are people who follow these guys who are early adopters, and if you're able to get them to adopt, Then comes the early majority, right? These are the guys who, if you remember the 6 layers of stages that I spoke about, these are the compliant guys. They will make whatever changes need to be done. They will adopt as long as they see everyone else adopting. And these are the guys who will adopt only if you force them to, compliant guys, right? And these are guys who do not necessarily want to adopt at all. These are the last set of guys who are still talking about how things used to be 15 years back or 20 years back. Most change management process communications addresses everyone, right? But the most critical piece that you need to get and the most critical people you need to identify and communicate to and get them on board is this guys. These guys will anyway work with you, early adopters, right? So these are the co-creators that I'm talking about. It is the next set of people that you need to actually get them to talk about what change that you're trying to drive and how that will benefit the organization and all of that. So once you cross this, then it is the momentum will build and you will find that you will achieve scale in terms of adoption. So it is critical that you are able to get through this phase. And this is also what Jeffrey Moore called as the chasm, because this is where most of the change management process or innovation adoption fails. So I'll stop there. So that is the second phase of the 4-phase process of any change management project, which is initiate, mobilize, scale, and embed. Any thoughts, comments, questions so far? So I'll really appreciate if you can have a conversation rather than just me talking about what I think, because this could then very well be. Thanks, sir. Sir. Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you. So we move to the next one, scale. This is the place where everyone knows what needs to be done in terms of processes, tactics, and strategy. There is only 2 things that I would like to talk about when it comes to scaling your change management process or change that you're trying to drive. So as long as you have energy and momentum, you are good. You're in a good place, and you will find that you're more successful in your change management process in any case. So another way to think about energy and momentum is in order to sustain your energy that you've built in the last step, you need to have momentum in your process and communication. And communication not just once, but communication on a hyperdrive, which is why communication squared, E is equal to MC squared. Play on Einstein's equation, but it is critically important that you not only sustain, but inject energy throughout your change management process in order for your process to be successful. And now the question then comes is, what builds momentum and how do we communicate? So now momentum is built like this, right? So you need to know what are you going to achieve in a year. And once you know that, you know what you need to do for the next quarter. Once you know what you need to do in the next quarter, you know what needs to be done next month. What next month leads to what to be done next week. What next week leads to next day. What next day leads to next hour. You need to be very clear in terms of each one of these phases and what it means for the constituents to do what they do at an hourly basis, leads to what they do on a day, which leads to what needs to happen at a week, which leads to what needs to happen at a month, quarter, year, and depending upon how long your change management project is, it can go as long or as short. Extremely clear, with no ambiguity. That is the communication that you need to make. And hyper communicate. Err on the higher side of communication in terms of what they need to do every hour, what they need to do every day, what they need to do every week, what they need to do every month. And in order for you to be able to communicate that, you need to know, as the change management team, what needs to happen at each one of these levels, right? So one very important thing that people typically fail to do at this stage is not have a red flag device. So what is a red flag device? A red flag device is, if you're familiar with the Toyota manufacturing system, which is just-in-time manufacturing. In just-in-time manufacturing, anybody in the entire manufacturing line has the authority to stop the manufacturing line if they see something which is not working as it ought to be working. Right? So that is a red flag device. So they have a bell which they can ring, and the entire manufacturing comes to a stop. The entire line comes to a stop. So then everyone comes in, people come in to see what is happening and figure out what is the root cause of the problem that they are seeing and address the root cause. And until they are able to address the root cause, the production doesn't proceed. That's exactly what you need to do in your change management process as well. Do you have a red flag device? Do you have a process or a way for people to communicate to you and raise a red flag saying that, this is something that is not working and we need to do something about it. Otherwise, this entire project could derail. And do so confidently with a clear idea of no retribution, and also the fact that will be herald, not necessarily derail. Right? So we need to figure out a way to create this red flag device. It could be done in multiple different ways. You can do it using an anonymous mailbox. You can do it using old school low tech feedback boxes. You could do it at all hands meetings that you run. It could be an email. It could be someone voicing their concerns at one of these status updates that you give. It could be someone raising this at a steering committee meeting or whatever. So that's something that people need to think about, because the earlier that you know that something is not going right, the easier it is for you to address it so that your project doesn't fail. Another thing that is important here to understand is that it is a crucial conversation. So what is a crucial conversation? What do I mean by a crucial conversation? Any conversation that has high stakes in terms of the impact that it can have on the project, has strong emotions, where people feel strongly about something, that either strongly feel that it is not right, it is not working, or there is something wrong, and has opposing opinions. Someone thinks that it is right, someone thinks it is not right, and there is strong emotions involved, and the stakes are high. It is a crucial conversation. And when you have a crucial conversation, it is extremely important that you take the time to sit down and listen. And I remember attending a training that was done by the Franklin Covey organization, and in one of those trainings, they said that how do you listen, and listen not to respond but to listen to understand, right? So they say, if you remember the 7 habits of highly effective people, the second habit, if I remember correctly, is seek first to understand, then to be understood, right? So they have this talking stick. So anyone who has the talking stick can talk. Everyone is supposed to listen, right? And once someone has finished talking, then the other person paraphrases what they understood from whatever the person said, and then have a conversation whether the understanding was right or wrong. And then the other person gets a chance to talk about their perspective and discuss and kind of come together in a way that both of them either agree on the next step, or have the same opinion after the conversation, or agree to disagree and move forward. Either ways, whatever was the conflict, it needs to be resolved in that moment. And that is a very critical piece, especially when you're looking to scale your change process, when you're moving from POC to large scale adoption. So I'll again stop there before we kind of move to the last step, which is embed into the management structure and systems itself. And maybe ask any questions, comments, thoughts. So I've said this multiple times. I don't know whether any of you have heard me say this before. My physics professor, when I was in college, used to say that there are no questions, comments. It only means two things: either people attending all agree or understand what is being said, or everyone just completely disagrees to everything that is being said. I personally presume that it is always somewhere in the middle. People are reluctant to say because they might feel that what they are about to say is not important, or is not critical, or is not right, or they may construe to be silly. So don't worry about it. Thanks, Aurora sir. I understand. Yeah. So if nothing else, then we can move to the next step in the process, which is how do you embed that new process into the structure itself. So again, I come back to the same hierarchy. You need to have a policy which states that this is the new policy after the change. You need to have a new process very clearly defined as to going forward on from 1st of April, this is the new process. You need to have systems. What do I mean by systems? Systems are management structures, right? So for example, the monthly reports that are being sent out. What are the how is the goal structures how are the goals being set? How are performance appraisals being done? How are bonuses being paid out? All of these, how are promotions being given? So all of these are systems, right? So then comes how are thinkings and behaviors. What kind of behaviors will be tolerated and what kind of behaviors will not be tolerated going forward? And therefore, what is the belief that we as an organization hold and will promote for? So that's something that you need to look at every one of these phases, depending upon where your change management was targeted at, and everything below needs to be changed, redid, and reinformed. Finally, we need to understand gravity, right? So gravity is not just in the physical world, it is also in the change management world. So there are 6 levels of gravity that every change project has to fight. Individual gravity, why should I change? I do not want to change. Team gravity, as a team, we do not want to change. We are happy the way we work and we do not want to change that. So we do not want to change, let's say, for example, how we meet. We do not want to change how we report. We don't want to change how we engage with other teams, whatever. So that's the team gravity. Then comes organizational gravity. As a company, we do not want to change. We are happy doing the way the work that we are doing, right? Then comes industry gravity. So as an industry, everyone does the same things about their industry the same way. That's why you will find any industrial disruption comes from outside their industry. So then comes the country gravity or ethnic gravity. As a people, as citizens of a country, we do things in a way. Let's say, for example, in India, we are proud about Jugaad, right? So it's a thing in India. Chalta hai is an attitude that is a thing in India, right? So same way in Germany, they do things in a different way. If you go to the US, they do things in a different way. You go to Australia, they do things in a different way. 4 o'clock, having beer in office at 4 o'clock in the evening is okay in Australia. And rather is common in Australia, not in a lot of other places, right? So that's the country level of gravity. Then comes the cultural gravity, so which is as a culture, what do we want to do? Now the point is, as a change management process, you would have overcome each one of these, right? As an enemy to overcome or as a problem to overcome. But you can also use this to your advantage. Once you've made the change, what can you do to make this the next normal or the status quo or the gravity that pulls
Mukesh,
and keeps people together?
here I think we can add also on the need-based gravity, because that is a need. Without need means that is somewhere we have to adopt this, otherwise there is no option. So need-based gravity, I think also we can think on this.
Very, very valid point. So need-based is another thing that we can add in terms of gravity. It is absolutely necessary for someone to do their job. in a way, right? So that is need, creating the need gravity. Thank you so much. Great idea. So any questions, thoughts, and comments? I've kind of finished whatever I had in place. So at the embed phase, we actually again go back to the initiatives, because by the time you embed or finish this, there is already another change project already looming along the horizon, because that's the life that we live. That's the world that we live in, which is constantly changing. So then we go through the entire process again. So any questions, thoughts, comments so far on what you heard? Guys, it's important that we have a conversation. I would like everyone to unmute yourself, and if nothing else, at least provide me feedback in terms of what you thought. Was this useful? Was this not useful? Is there anything that you thought was useful from the entire set of things that we spoke about? By the way, I'm running a masterclass. It's a four 1-hour sessions that I will be running in my personal capacity, where I will take each one of these phases and go deeper, and also talk about do's and don'ts, which is starting on the 1st of May. You can find more information about it on the chat. I will post it. But what is it that you learned, or what is it that one thing that you think you saw was new and that could help you in your change management process or change management project? Anyone? Anyone would like to go first? Anything new that you saw today? Anything useful that you saw today? Can everyone unmute? Just wondering whether there is some technical glitch and people are not able to unmute.
Yeah, no, there is no issue. I think that depend on the person. I think whatever we are doing in general way, but on the basis of understanding in this this part, this presentation is there, so that we can say a new type of thing I have seen. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone else wants to say something? Anything new? Anything useful? Because if it was not useful, it is. I would really apologize if none of the content that was shared was useful, because it took 1 hour of your time away from your work and from your family. So I believe there should have been something useful, at least one of all the 44 different framework of thought that I shared. Anyone? Guys, on one end, people say that change management is a big problem, and on the other, if you're not able to. Okay, so if there are no further thoughts or comments, I think that is all I had for today. If there are any questions that you have, let me know. I'll stick around for the next 5-10 minutes. And otherwise, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. And next month we will invite a customer who will talk about what they drive or how they drive digital transformation within their organization. So that's going to be the next month, last Thursday, 11 a.m. If one of you thinks that you would like to share how you drive digital transformation in your organization, let me know, and we can invite you to do that as well. Subhash, you were saying something? I thought you wanted to say something.
Yeah, Mukesh, in that your masterclass part, I have shared my personal mail ID.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. I got it. No problem. So that's a personal project that I'm running. So yeah, thank you so much for signing up. Looking forward to that. Anyone else? Any questions? Otherwise, you can drop off. I will stick around if someone has any questions.
Yeah, I think we have to conclude.
Yeah, conclude, sir. So if you want to drop off, you can drop off now. No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so looks like there are no further questions at all. So thank you. Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, Abhinath. Thanks, I don't know, Shine Othen. Is that how I pronounce your name? Anyway, thank you for your time and attention. Take care. Have a great day. Bye.